that sound.
Okay, Lamborghini.
Big Lamborghini this week.
You're doing great.
It's called the Urus, and because it's a Lamborghini and I'm reviewing it, I'm contractually obliged to tell you what the word Urus means, because it's bound to be something deliciously Italian and exotic. So what could it be? Flaming sword, laser, nunchuck, thrusting lasagna? Oh. Although I suppose it's perfect really in the sense that the Urus here revives something big and fat from the past. Feels like the Urus is Lamborghini's first SUV, but it's not. That was the LM002 in the 80s. Some people called that car the Rambo Lambo. Not sure why. Maybe it was because it was so ugly that it made them do this.
I wanna go home, I wanna go.
Probably not though, because I reckon it looked mint. Anyway, Lamborghini's well-documented origins as a maker of tractors means that a Chelsea one shouldn't really be that weird. And yet it is. Now, of course, that's because we associate Lamborghini, quite rightly, with mental supercars. But as any car manufacturer accountant will tell you, sports cars make good individual profit margins per unit, but they don't sell in big numbers. Not to compare these two brands directly, but that's why self-confessed sporty brand Seat doesn't have a sports car, and yet by the end of this year it'll have 4 SUVs in its showrooms. And of course it's why Porsche did a big corporate shoulder shrug to all the naysayers after it announced the first Cayenne. Sure enough, last year Porsche sold almost 3 times as many SUVs as it did sports cars, and it'll be the same sort of thing with this. Yep, the Urus here is destined to become to the Aventador and the, what's that Lambo called? Huracan. The Urus here is destined to become to the Aventador and the Huracan what a Travelodge is to Claridge's and the Ritz. It's a Lambo for the common people.
I mean, it's not 5-star, but it's certainly competitive.
Well... Yeah, so I've actually worked this out, and you could stay at the Travelodge in Washington Services for 11 years for the same price as one of these. So it's not common exactly, is it? This is one expensive SUV, but then that's obvious. It was never going to be cheap, was it? Problem is, you could quite reasonably expect something fairly exclusive for that sort of money, but that's not necessarily the case here. See, Lamborghini is part of the big Volkswagen group, which means it has access to the full catalogue of badge parts. And so, in another classic case of business before pleasure, this thing, instead of being built from the ground up in Italy, it's basically an array of Audi parts. And while the outside is pretty well disguised, it's fair to say, in here that commonality is in parts a bit too easy to spot. The indicators have an Audi A1 feel about them, and so do the switches in the doors. And the basic screen architecture is Audi too, albeit top-end Audi. Having said that, there are some things in here that you would never find in an Audi or anything else, like this fighter jet gear selector thing, which also gives you access to the driving modes. And the fancy embroidery on the seats and all the carbon fibre in here. And the word Lamborghini on the dashboard, which you're obviously not going to find anywhere else. But more than that, the driving position is pure supercar. You can sink the seat so low that it feels like your belt buckle is actually underneath the chassis. The wheel's more telescopic than the Hubble, and the pedals are way down where the engine is. So you end up with that archetypal low, slung back driving position, but with the wheel really close to you. It's very supercar and not very SUV. But then of course you do get some of the advantages of being in an SUV, sitting high, better visibility, that sort of thing. I mean, as SUVs go, visibility's not brilliant because you're sat so low and the rear screen's so shallow and the pillars are thick. But I mean, as compared to a standard Lamborghini, other than that, most of the fundamental stupidity of the other Lamborghinis is pretty much gone. So like the last one I drove, which was a Huracan Spider, was undoubtedly really exciting. But it was also pretty stupid in a variety of ways. Verging into bad in some cases, ergonomically terrible, really cramped, stupid indicators on the steering wheel, clunky infotainment system, patchy interior quality, just not in keeping with the price tag in a lot of ways, you know. In here though, the twin touchscreen infotainment setup is not only futuristic looking, it's actually very intuitive and works really well. It's clear and it's logical and it's got haptic feedback, so it clicks when you touch it no matter where you are on the screen itself. Literally a nice touch. It all just feels like it was put together by Audi rather than by a bloke called Francesco using an IKEA picture hanging kit. Now, that's definitely not a racist stereotype, that's actually how they used to make Lamborghinis. And yet all of this sensibility is encompassed in a shell of pure theatre, inside and out. For me it's perfect because you get all of the well-engineered practicality, solidity and intuitiveness of an Audi. Sort of. When I drove this thing 200 miles up the A1 from the office, all of the carbon fibre bits were rattling like a chain smoker's lungs. But most of the insanity of an actual supercar. This really is the Lamborghini hatchback that you've been waiting for. In that context, I think this thing looks like good value. Now I know, it is stupid talking about price at this end of the market, so I won't dwell here for long. But at £165,000, it's £110,000 cheaper than a basic Aventador, and pretty much on par with all of the other mad SUVs that you might be thinking about if price really isn't an issue for you. And it's practical, so we can talk about boot space if you like. There it is. And there's how much it has. And we can show you that space in the context of the other posh SUVs. And that's useful, but at the end of the day, what actually matters is, can I fit my golf clubs or a dead body or whatever other stereotype you want to go to into the boot of this thing? And the answer is yes. There are limits and imperfections, of course. The first one being that although it has masses of headroom up front, in the back, it's a little bit cramped, especially for headroom, and that's because of the shape of the roof. And if you go for the 4-seat option, it looks better at the back, but you lose boot space and you lose the ability to fold the rear bench down, which really hinders practicality. On top of that, at the front, there is precious little storage. For example, if you've got one of those plus-size phones, you probably won't even fit it into the space that's dedicated for a phone, which is where the wireless phone charging pad is. And the glove box and the cup holders and the door pockets are all tiny. But then again, lambasting a Lamborghini for stuff like that is kind of like lambasting a beauty pageant contestant for not knowing about the shortfalls of domestic education policy.
Our education over here in the US should help the US, or should help South Africa, and should help the Iraq and the Asian countries.
But one thing that is important, the car I was driving didn't even have DAB radio. And that's how I found out that it's optional. Now I know that most buyers will tick that option without giving it a second thought. But surely, in 165 grand worth of Lamborghini, you should be throwing DAB in for free, right? Because you know what sort of car does get DAB for free? A Dacia. Imagine driving 160 odd grand's worth of Lamborghini up the A1 and having to listen to a football match with sound quality like this. I know that's the very definition of a first world problem. Shouldn't be happening though, right? What we should really be talking about, obviously, is whether this lardy arse Lambo really does behave like the sort of supercar that the stylists want you to think that it is. And the answer is no. But it does come closer to giving you a proper sports car experience than anything that this lardy or practical or hatchbacky has any right to. It does it the hard way, but it does it all the same. So obviously it's not a proper sports car in the way that most people would define one, like a Mazda MX-5 say. Something that's light, quite simple, rear wheel drive, you know, that sort of archetypal pure driving experience. And sort of make it feel like a sports car, there is a massive amount of trickery, cheating really, going into it. Rear biased center differential, 4-wheel drive, 4-wheel steering, torque vectoring, adaptable air suspension with height adjustment, selectable driving modes. You get the idea. Basically, if you want to alter this thing's characteristics, you're far better off plugging it into a laptop than you are putting on a set of overalls and crawling underneath it. All that stuff I mentioned before is not just to counter this thing's weight, all 2.2 tons of it, but because it needs to be all things to all people, all rich people. It needs to be fast and comfortable and, for some reason, go off-road. Well, what do you know?
Great success.
By most measures, this is a very, very fun car. And by most measures, it's a very, very comfortable car. And I'm told that by other measures, it's very, very good off-road too. I can tell you one thing for sure though, that when you're not off-road, this is much better than the sum of its dynamically flowed parts. Now everything is adjustable between comfort and sporty as per every high-end car. And it's the usual stuff: steering weight, suspension stiffness, loudness, but it's neither really luxurious at one end nor really like track ready at the other. It's not a limo and it's not a race car, it's sort of degrees in the middle. But I mean, there's the middle and there's the middle. Even at its sharpest setting, this still leans into corners a little bit. And the steering's really sharp, but it's arguably a bit too light and it's lacking in feel. But this in no way feels as heavy as it is. It's nimble and there's somehow not that much inertia either when you're accelerating or when you're turning corners. It feels balanced and almost rear biased, and it's as quick to change direction as a career politician. The noise helps too. Listen. The noise from this, that is, a twin-turbo V8 petrol engine with 650 horsepower and an even more phenomenal 850 Newton meters of torque. Now we'll pause the histrionics here and mention the fuel economy for a second, such as it is. Yep, they're not typos, it really does spit out this much crap. Oh well. So yeah, the engine, again, not true 100% Lamborghini in the sense that it's not a V12, it's a V8. And also because a significant proportion of the noise is from sound augmentation software, which is the sort of thing you'll find in a hot hatchback for like a fifth of the price. But it's extremely loud and it's extremely fast. It might not have quite the earth-shattering rumble that the Mercedes AMG V8 has, but really we're talking degrees of awesomeness here. Ultimately, right, it feels completely unnatural to be making something this big go this quickly, and that really never gets old. And let's face it, that's what's important about the Urus. It will no doubt do an astonishing supercar-ish lap time on any given track, but all it really needs to be is passably dynamic, spacious, mental looking, and of course, insanely fast in a straight line. And in those areas, it absolutely succeeds. It's supercar stupid on the outside. It will outrun pretty much anything it comes across in a straight line. And yet, because it's basically an Audi, it has a large boot, a proper amount of space inside, and electrics that are likely to keep working. Cars like this are supposed to evoke a reaction, whatever that reaction is. I got into this job to drive stuff like this, so if I could afford one, I would definitely buy one. And those are the reasons beyond the spreadsheet projections that this thing will sell well. It's a true candidate for that if you could only have one car for the rest of your life thing. Thanks for watching, really appreciate your time, hope you enjoyed it. Please look at our other reviews and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and we'll see you next week. Cheers, bye.